The classroom at Galactic Military Academy was massive, built to accommodate students from dozens of different species. Some cadets sat on benches, others stood on platforms, and a few floated in specialized gravity pods. Commander Velthar stood at the front, his forearms gesturing at the holographic display showing casualty statistics from various military forces across known space. Jiwan sat quietly in the middle row, her human-sized chair looking small compared to the massive seats around her. She was one of only 2 humans at the Academy this year. Earth had joined the Galactic Union just 5 years ago, and humans were still a curiosity to most species. Her classmates often stared at her, probably wondering how such a fragile-looking creature could survive military training. Commander Velthar's voice clicked and buzzed through the translator. As you can see, elite military forces across the galaxy maintain fatality rates between 15 and 30% during active combat operations. This is considered acceptable given the nature of modern warfare. A large avian cadet named Rix raised his wing. His feathers were a brilliant blue and he carried himself with obvious pride. Commander, my people's Sky Warriors maintain only a 12% fatality rate. We are considered the finest fighting force in 3 sectors. Yes, Cadet Rix, Velthar acknowledged. The Sky Warriors are indeed exceptional. Their low fatality rate comes from superior speed and aerial tactical advantages. The commander's compound eyes scanned the room. Does anyone know of a lower rate among established military forces? Silence filled the classroom. Students looked at each other, but no one spoke. Rix preened his feathers, clearly satisfied with his people's accomplishment. Then Rix turned toward Jiwan, a mocking tone in his voice. What about Earth Marines? Surely the humans keep records, though I imagine the numbers are not impressive. I have read that human bodies are quite fragile. Thin skin, no natural armor, weak bones. They break easily, yes? Several students made sounds that the translators interpreted as laughter. Jiwan felt dozens of eyes turned toward her. Her face remained calm, though her hands tightened slightly on her datapad. Across the room, Hyunwoo, the other human cadet, sat up straighter in his seat. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Commander Velthar raised one claw for silence. Cadet Jiwan, the question is valid, even if rudely posed. Do you know Earth Marine combat statistics? Jiwan stood slowly, her boots making soft sounds on the floor. She was shorter than most species in the room, and her uniform looked plain compared to the exotic armor and clothing of her classmates. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. Yes, Commander. Earth Marines maintain a fatality rate of 0.8%. The room went completely silent for 3 seconds. Then chaos erupted. Impossible. Rix shrieked, his wings flaring. No military force has ever achieved such a rate. Other students began talking over each other, their voices mixing into a confused noise that the translators struggled to process. Some laughed openly. Others simply stared at Jiwan as if she had lost her mind. A few whispered among themselves, clearly thinking she had misunderstood the question or confused her numbers. Commander Velthar's claws clicked sharply on his desk, demanding silence. The room gradually quieted. Cadet Jiwan, please repeat that number. Perhaps there was a translation error. 0.8%, Commander, Jiwan repeated. That is the fatality rate for Earth Marines in active combat zones, averaged across the last 50 years of recorded conflicts. That is absurd, Rick said, not bothering to raise his wing this time. It defies every principle of military science. Either your records are false or you do not understand what fatality rate means. Hyunwoo finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. The records are accurate. The number is correct. A large reptilian student named Cross turned to look at Hyunwoo. Then your Marines must not see real combat. Perhaps they only fight weak enemies or stay in protected positions. Our Marines see plenty of combat, Hyunwoo said quietly, more than most. Commander Velthar studied both humans carefully. His species was known for their tactical genius and had won countless battles across the centuries. He had seen too much war to dismiss any claim without investigation. The numbers you present contradict everything in our military databases. Human physiology is well documented. Your species has no natural armor, no enhanced healing, no redundant organs. A plasma weapon that would wound a Krenlar warrior would kill a human instantly. How can you claim such a low fatality rate? Jiwan met his gaze. I only report the facts, Commander. The number is accurate. Perhaps your databases are incomplete. Rix made a scoffing sound. Or perhaps humans are liars as well as fragile. Hyunwoo stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. Several students tensed, expecting a confrontation. But Hyunwoo simply said, "Call us liars again and we will have a different conversation." "Enough," Velthar commanded. His voice carried absolute authority. "Cadet Rix, you will control your speech. Cadet Hyunwoo, you will sit down." He waited until both students complied. This presents an interesting problem. Either the humans are providing false information, or we are missing something significant about their military doctrine. He tapped commands into his console. "I am assigning a class project. You will all research Earth Marine combat operations and prepare presentations by the end of this week. Focus on actual combat data, medical statistics, and operational doctrine. We will discover the truth behind this impossible number." The students began talking again as Velthar dismissed the class. Most were already accessing their datapads, searching for information about Earth military history. Rix flew past Jiwon's seat, intentionally close enough that his wing brushed against her. "We will expose your lies, human," he said softly. Jiwon gathered her things without responding. As she walked toward the exit, several other cadets stopped her with questions. How did Earth Marines achieve such a rate? What weapons did they use? What was their secret? She answered each question the same way. "Research and present your findings. Then you will understand." Hyunwoo waited for her outside the classroom. They walked together through the corridor, surrounded by alien students who towered over them or floated past on gravity pads. "They think we are lying," he said. "I know," Jiwon replied. "When they learn the truth, they will not believe that either. I know that too. Are you going to help them understand?" Jiwon was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "They need to discover it themselves. Otherwise, they will never really understand what the number means. They will just see a statistic." Hyunwoo nodded slowly. "The 0.8%. The ones we could not save," Jiwon said softly. Every single one remembered. Every single one mourned. Behind them, in the emptying classroom, Commander Velthar stood alone, staring at the holographic display. He had fought in 17 major battles and commanded troops for 40 years. He had seen species with armor like starship hulls die in droves. He had watched warriors with regenerative abilities succumb to wounds. And now these fragile humans claimed a fatality rate lower than any force in galactic history. Pulled up Earth's admission records to the Galactic Union. The species had been isolationist for thousands of years, fighting only among themselves. Their planet had seen countless wars, conflicts that scarred entire continents. They were good at killing. That much was obvious from their history. But this number suggested something else entirely. Velthar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Perhaps these humans were not good at killing. Perhaps they were good at something else, something the galaxy had never seen before. He would discover their secret one way or another. The number was impossible, but it was also real, and that meant everything he knew about warfare might be wrong. The Academy's main library was a vast space filled with holographic terminals and data stations. Students from dozens of species gathered there over the next 3 days, all researching the same topic. The humans had made an impossible claim, and everyone wanted to prove them wrong. Rix led the largest research group. He had recruited 7 other cadets, all from species with proud military traditions. They sat around a large terminal, pulling up every file they could find about Earth military history. What they discovered only confused them more. "Look at this," said Cross, the reptilian cadet. His clawed finger pointed at a screen showing casualty reports from Earth's last major conflict before joining the Galactic Union. 40% wounded in action. That is catastrophically high. But only 0.8% killed, Rix noted, his voice uncertain for the first time. "How is this possible?" "A 40% wound rate should produce at least a 20% fatality rate. These numbers make no sense." A small insectoid student named Tikva chittered thoughtfully. "Perhaps their definition of wounded is different. Maybe they only count minor injuries." Cross pulled up medical reports and his eyes widened. "No, look at this. Burns, lost limbs, shattered bones, organ damage. These are critical injuries. Any of these wounds would kill most species without immediate treatment." The group fell silent, staring at the medical data. The injuries were severe, often catastrophic. Yet somehow almost all of these critically wounded humans survived. "Their medical technology must be superior," Rick said finally. "That is the only explanation." But when they compared Earth medical technology to galactic standards, they found nothing exceptional. Humans had good medicine, but not better than the major spacefaring civilizations. In fact, some of their techniques seemed primitive compared to what the Krenlar or the Vex could do. Across the library, a different group was researching from another angle. Instructor Kale, a medical officer, had become interested in the question from a biological perspective. He had brought 3 students with him to review human physiology in detail. "They are so fragile," Kale said, studying a holographic model of human anatomy. "No exoskeleton, no natural armor plating. Their skin is easily pierced. Look at this. A single plasma shot would boil their internal organs." One of his students, a gelatinous being named Phlox, rippled thoughtfully. "Teacher, I found something strange. Humans have very good blood clotting systems, and their pain tolerance is unusually high for a species with such sensitive nerve endings." "That would help with survival, yes," Kyle agreed. "But it does not explain a 0.8% fatality rate. Many species have better healing factors than humans, yet their soldiers die at much higher rates." Another student pulled up combat footage from Earth historical archives. The videos showed human soldiers fighting with chemical projectile weapons, primitive compared to plasma rifles or particle beams. The battles looked chaotic and brutal. "Wait," Phlox said. "Go back, watch that section again." The footage replayed. It showed a human soldier getting hit by an explosion. The soldier fell, clearly injured. Then something happened that made all 3 researchers lean forward. 4 other human soldiers immediately stopped fighting. They ran to the injured soldier, ignoring enemy fire. One soldier threw his own body over the wounded one. Another fired his weapon wildly to provide cover. 2 more grabbed the injured soldier and dragged him away from the fighting. They stopped their attack to save one soldier. Kale said slowly, "That is tactically inefficient." They lost their position and exposed themselves to enemy fire. "Play more footage," Phlox suggested. They watched hours of combat recordings. The pattern repeated in every battle. When a human fell wounded, other humans immediately moved to help. They did not leave their injured soldiers behind. They did not wait for the fighting to end. They stopped everything to evacuate casualties. "This is insane," one student said. "They are sacrificing tactical advantage for individual soldiers. No wonder Earth had so many wars. This is terrible strategy." But Kale was not so sure. He had been a military doctor for 30 years. He had seen countless soldiers die waiting for evacuation after battles ended. "Perhaps," he said quietly. "Or perhaps they understand something we do not." Jiwon and Hyunwoo watched from a distance as their classmates researched. Several students had approached them with questions, but both humans had politely refused to help. The others needed to discover the truth themselves. "They are getting frustrated," Hyunwoo observed. "Rix looks angry. He expected to find lies," Jiwon said. "Instead, he is finding truth that makes no sense to him." "That is worse." A young human cadet named Minji joined them. She was studying engineering, not combat tactics, but she had been following the research with interest. "I have been looking at something different," she said. "I found footage of medical evacuation ships. Have you seen them?" Hyunwoo shook his head. "What about them?" "They fly into active combat zones. No weapons, just shields and engines. They land in the middle of battles to pick up wounded soldiers." Minji pulled up a video on her datapad. It showed a sleek ship dropping into a war zone while explosions burst around it. The ship landed for exactly 90 seconds, loaded wounded soldiers, then screamed back into the sky. "They do this dozens of times during every major battle." "Yes," Jiwon said. "That is standard procedure." "But it is crazy," Minji said. "These ships get shot down sometimes. The pilots die, all to evacuate wounded soldiers who might die anyway. Why risk the living to save the dying?" Jiwon and Hyunwoo exchanged looks. "Because they are not dying," Hyunwoo said. "They are wounded." "That is different." "But the risk is worth it," Jiwon finished. "Always." On the 4th day, Ambassador Taewon Park visited the academy. He was Earth's representative to the Galactic Union, a former Marine himself. Commander Velthar had requested his presence to clarify some confusion about Earth military doctrine. They met in Velthar's office, a circular room with displays showing tactical simulations. Taewon had gray hair and walked with a slight limp. His uniform bore medals that Velthar recognized, awards for valor in combat. "Ambassador, my students are struggling to understand Earth casualty rates," Velthar said directly. His species did not waste time with small talk. Your numbers appear impossible given human physiology and combat intensity. Taewon smiled slightly. I have been watching your students' research. They are asking the right questions now. That is good. Then perhaps you can provide answers. I could, Taewon said, but answers without understanding are worthless. Your students have discovered that we have high wound rates but low fatality rates. They have seen our evacuation procedures. They know we stop fighting to save wounded soldiers, but they still do not understand why. Explain it to me then. Taewon walked to the window overlooking the academy grounds. Outside, cadets from 100 species trained together. Commander, what is the purpose of a military? To win wars, Velthar answered immediately. And how do you measure victory? Achievement of strategic objectives. Territory taken, enemies defeated, threats eliminated. Yes, Taewon said. That is how everyone measures victory. Everyone except us. He turned back to face Velthar. Earth Marines measure victory differently. We win when our people come home. Velthar's mandibles clicked in confusion, but casualties are inevitable in war. Soldiers understand they may die. That is the nature of military service. Perhaps for other species, Taewon said, but humans made a different choice. We decided that our weakness would not be a death sentence. It would be a promise. What promise? That we would never abandon each other. That every Marine matters. That we would move heaven and earth to bring our wounded home alive. Taewon's voice grew intense. You see our low fatality rate as impossible. We see it as mandatory. Every death is a failure. Every life saved is a victory. Velthar was silent for a long moment. That is why you risk so much for individual soldiers. Why you divert resources to medical evacuation. Why you stop attacks to retrieve wounded. Now you are beginning to understand, but it is still inefficient. You lose tactical advantages. You expose healthy soldiers to danger. By every military principle, your doctrine should fail. Taewon smiled grimly. Then perhaps your principles are wrong. Come to my lecture tomorrow, Commander. I have invited someone who can explain better than I can. Someone who lived it. That evening, Jiwon sat in her quarters reviewing notes. Her datapad chimed with an incoming message. It was from Rix, human cadet. I have researched your claims. I find no lies, but I find no sense either. Your Marines sacrifice efficiency for sentiment. They risk the living for the dying. This is foolishness, not genius. Tomorrow I will prove that Earth's low fatality rate is luck, not skill. Jiwon did not reply. She simply added the message to her files and continued her work. Tomorrow, Rix and the others would learn the truth. Tomorrow they would understand what 0.8% really meant. The lecture hall was completely full the next morning. Word had spread about the special guest, and even students from other classes had come to watch. Commander Velthar stood at the front of the room, waiting for silence. Behind him, a door opened. Colonel Daehyun entered in a hover chair. The old soldier's body told a story of violence and survival. Burn scars covered the left side of his face and neck. His right arm was completely synthetic, the metal barely hidden under his uniform sleeve. His left leg was gone below the knee, replaced by an advanced prosthetic. More scars, visible and probably invisible, marked him as someone who had seen terrible combat. The room went silent. Every student stared at the colonel, seeing the evidence of catastrophic injuries. By all galactic standards, someone with these wounds should be dead, yet here he sat, alive and apparently functional. Good morning, Daehyun said. His voice was rough but strong. I am Colonel Daehyun, retired Earth Marines. I served for 30 years, fought in 4 major conflicts, and led Marines in 17 separate combat operations. He gestured to his scarred body. As you can see, I did not leave service unmarked. Rix raised his wing. Colonel, how did you survive those injuries? The burns alone should have killed you. They almost did, Daehyun said simply. I was hit by an incendiary weapon during an assault on a fortified position. My armor melted into my skin. My arm was shattered. My leg was severed. I was clinically dead for 2 minutes. He paused. But I survived because my fellow Marines refused to let me die. He activated the holographic display. Combat footage appeared, showing a battle on a rocky planet. Human soldiers advanced under heavy fire. Then an explosion engulfed one soldier. The figure fell, burning. That is me, Daehyun said quietly. Watch what happens next. 3 Marines immediately broke from cover. Enemy fire hit the ground around them. One Marine took a shot to the shoulder but kept moving. They reached the burning soldier, used fire suppression foam, and began dragging him back. 2 more Marines provided covering fire. deliberately drawing enemy attention away from the rescue. The footage continued. A medical transport dropped from the sky into the combat zone. It landed despite plasma fire hitting its shields. The wounded soldier was loaded in 14 seconds. The transport lifted off and disappeared. From the moment I was hit to the moment I reached surgical care was 43 minutes, Daehyun said. In those 43 minutes, 6 Marines were wounded protecting me. 2 ships were damaged evacuating me. 12 soldiers diverted from the attack to ensure my survival. By any tactical measure, the mission was compromised to save 1 dying man. That proves my point, Rick said. You sacrificed efficiency for 1 soldier. That is poor strategy, is it? Daehyun pulled up new data. The attack succeeded. We took the objective despite the evacuation. The 6 Marines wounded protecting me all survived and returned to duty within 3 weeks. The ships were repaired. And I survived to command 3 more operations where my experience saved dozens of lives. He changed the display to show casualty statistics. But that is not why we do it. We do not save wounded soldiers because it is efficient. We save them because that is who we are. Instructor Kale spoke up. Colonel, I have studied your injuries. By every medical standard, you should have died before reaching surgical care. Your survival rate makes no sense. You are right, Daehyun agreed. By galactic standards, I should be dead. So should thousands of other Marines. But we developed different standards. He pulled up a new chart. This is Earth Marine medical doctrine. We call it the Golden Hour Principle. The chart showed a timeline: trauma, immediate field response, evacuation, and surgery, all within 60 minutes. Any critically wounded Marine will reach surgical care within 1 hour, Daehyun explained. No exceptions. No excuses. We built our entire military medical system around this principle. Combat medics are embedded in every squad. Medical evacuation ships are positioned near every combat zone. Field hospitals are mobile and heavily defended. We spend more resources saving wounded soldiers than fighting battles. But why? Cross asked. Soldiers understand they may die. It is part of service. Why dedicate so much to saving them? Daehyun's expression hardened. Because human bodies are fragile. You said it yourself. We have no natural armor, no redundant organs, no enhanced healing. A wound that would slow down a Krenlar warrior will kill a human in minutes. He leaned forward in his chair. So we made a choice. Our weakness would not be a death sentence. It would be a promise. A promise that if you fall, we will come for you. That you will not die alone on some battlefield. That your life matters more than the mission, more than the objective, more than victory itself. He pulled up more footage. Battle after battle showing the same pattern. Marines under fire stopping to evacuate wounded. Medical ships flying into danger. Soldiers forming protective walls around injured comrades with their own bodies. Every Marine knows this promise, Daehyun continued. They know that if they are wounded, the entire military will move to save them. Transport ships will fly through enemy fire. Soldiers will expose themselves to danger. Resources will be diverted, missions adjusted, even objectives abandoned if necessary. Because no mission is worth more than a Marine's life. That is sentiment, not strategy, Rix argued. You let emotion override tactical sense, do we? Daehyun pulled up new statistics. After Earth implemented this doctrine, recruitment increased 300%. Soldiers fight with incredible courage because they know they will not be abandoned. Morale is the highest of any military force. Veteran retention is near perfect, and our fatality rate dropped from 18% to 0.8% over 20 years. He showed comparative data. Other militaries triage wounded. They save who they can and leave the rest to die. It is efficient. It is logical. But what does it teach soldiers? It teaches them that they are expendable, that their life only matters if they can still fight. That injury means abandonment. Daehyun's voice grew intense. Earth Marines learn something different. They learn that every life is precious, that no one is left behind, that they fight for each other as much as for any objective. This is not weakness. This is the strongest force multiplier we have ever discovered. The room was completely silent now. Students who had been skeptical were beginning to understand something fundamental about human military doctrine. Commander Velthar spoke. Colonel, I have commanded for 40 years. I have left wounded soldiers on battlefields because evacuation was impossible. I have watched good warriors die because saving them would risk more lives. You are saying this is wrong? I am saying humans chose differently, Daehyun replied. We decided that impossible just means we have not tried hard enough. We developed technology and tactics specifically to make evacuation possible. We trained every soldier in advanced medical care. We positioned resources to enable rapid response. We made saving our wounded the primary mission. He showed a video that stunned everyone watching. A fortified enemy position heavily defended. Human Marines called in artillery strikes on their own location, destroying the entire area. But before the strikes hit, medical transports had already evacuated every single wounded Marine, even under impossible fire. We won that battle, Dae-hyun said. Destroyed the enemy position completely, and we did not leave a single wounded Marine behind. The artillery commanders waited 3 minutes past optimal strike time to ensure evacuation was complete. 3 minutes that could have cost us the battle, but we won anyway and everyone came home. Ji-won stood. Colonel, permission to add something? Dae-hyun nodded. Go ahead, cadet. The 0.8% fatality rate is accurate, Ji-won said to the class. But those numbers are not a success. They are a failure. The 0.8% represents the Marines we could not save despite everything we did. Despite immediate response, despite perfect evacuation, despite the best medical care, those Marines died. And we remember every single one. Their names are on memorial walls across Earth. We study what went wrong. We develop new procedures to prevent it from happening again. Because 0.8% is still too high. The room erupted with whispers. Hyunwoo stood as well. Other militaries accept casualties as inevitable. We refuse to accept any death as inevitable. Every fatality drives us to improve, to develop better medicine, faster evacuation, stronger protection. The goal is not 0.8%. The goal is 0. That is impossible, Rick said, but his voice had lost its mocking tone. 0 combat deaths cannot be achieved. Maybe not, Dae-hyun agreed. But we will keep trying anyway, because that is the promise. That is who we are. He looked around the room at the alien students. You asked what Earth Marine fatality rates are. Now you know. But more importantly, you understand why. We do not have natural armor, so we built a different kind of protection. We protect each other. Every Marine is worth the entire Corps, and the entire Corps will come for every Marine. Always. The lecture ended, but no one moved. The students sat in silence, processing what they had learned. Their assumptions about military efficiency, about tactical doctrine, about the acceptable cost of war, all of it had been challenged. Commander Velthar stared at the casualty statistics on the display. 40 years of military service. 3 days after Colonel Dae-hyun's lecture, Commander Velthar stood in the Academy's Combat Simulation Center. The massive room could recreate any battlefield environment with perfect accuracy. Today it would test whether human military doctrine actually worked, or if it was just noble sentiment that got people killed. Captain Soo-hyun, an active-duty Earth Marine officer, stood beside him. She had arrived that morning as a technical advisor for the simulation. Unlike the retired colonel, she showed no visible injuries, but Velthar had learned that meant little with humans. They were good at hiding damage. Captain, are you confident in this test? Velthar asked. Soo-hyun smiled slightly. Confident that it will be educational, yes. Confident about what you will learn, less so. The students filed in, all 70 cadets from the Advanced Tactics class. They had spent the last week studying Earth military doctrine in detail, and opinions were divided. Some thought the humans had discovered something revolutionary. Others, including Rick's, believed the whole thing was just luck, and that proper testing would expose the flaws. Velthar activated the holographic display showing the simulation scenario. Today you will run the defense of Kelvar Station. This is a historical engagement that occurred 12 years ago. A mixed-species garrison of 300 soldiers held this supply depot against an attacking force of 1,000 for 3 standard days. The display showed the station, a fortified position on a barren moon. The defense was technically successful. The garrison held until reinforcements arrived. However, casualties were severe. 68% of defenders were wounded or killed. Most wounded died before medical evacuation could occur after the battle ended. Rick studied the scenario. A difficult engagement but winnable. What are the parameters for our simulation? 2 teams will run this scenario, Velthar explained. Team 1 will use standard galactic military doctrine. Team 2 will use Earth Marine doctrine. Both teams will have identical forces, weapons, and starting positions. The simulation will run in real-time compression. 3 days compressed to 3 hours. Captain Suhyun stepped forward. I will be advising Team 2 on proper implementation of marine protocols. Commander Velthar will advise Team 1. All other factors remain equal. The simulation will measure tactical success, casualty rates, and overall effectiveness. The teams were divided. Rix immediately volunteered to lead Team 1, confident that proper military doctrine would prove superior. Jiwon and Hyunwoo took command positions on Team 2, with Minji handling technical support. The simulation began with both teams in identical starting positions. Enemy forces approached the station from multiple angles. The attacks came in waves, testing the defenders' ability to hold key positions while managing resources and personnel. Team 1 performed brilliantly. Rix positioned his forces efficiently, rotating troops to give everyone rest, concentrating fire on the most dangerous threats. When soldiers were wounded, medics treated them if possible, but combat effectiveness remained the priority. Severely wounded soldiers were moved to the medical bay and essentially removed from combat. The healthy continued fighting. Watching from the observation deck, Instructor Kale noted the efficiency. They are doing well. Minimal wasted movement, logical resource allocation, and good tactical awareness. In Team 2's simulation, things looked very different. When the first Marine was hit by enemy fire, the immediate response seemed chaotic to observers. 3 nearby soldiers stopped what they were doing and converged on the wounded Marine. 1 provided covering fire. 2 dragged the injured soldier to a more protected position where a medic was already moving. They are breaking formation, Rix noted from his own simulation, glancing at the monitor showing Team 2. That will cost them, but Captain Suhyun was nodding approvingly. Good response time, 14 seconds from injury to medical care. That Marine will survive and return to duty. As the simulation continued, the pattern repeated. Team 1 fought efficiently, maintaining positions and maximizing firepower. Team 2 constantly shifted, with soldiers moving to protect wounded comrades, medics operating under covering fire, and defensive positions adjusted to create protected evacuation routes. By the end of the first simulated day, the differences were stark. Team 1 had held all their positions with minimal tactical complications. Team 2 had temporarily lost 2 positions while evacuating wounded, but had recaptured them once casualties were secured. See, Rick said during a brief break. Our casualty rate is lower because we do not expose healthy soldiers to unnecessary risk. Their doctrine is costing them. But when Captain Suhyun pulled up detailed statistics, the numbers told a different story. Team 1 had suffered 32 casualties with 18 killed and 14 wounded. Team 2 had 41 casualties but only 2 killed and 39 wounded. Cross studied the numbers, confused. Team 2 has more total casualties but fewer deaths. How is this possible? Because wounded Marines are immediately evacuated and treated, Suhyun explained. In Team 1's simulation, wounded soldiers often remain in dangerous positions, unable to move and unable to fight. They become additional casualties. In Team 2, wounded are removed from danger immediately and treated by dedicated medical staff. The survival rate is much higher. The simulation continued through the second and third days. Enemy attacks intensified. Both teams struggled under the pressure. Team 1's defenders were exhausted, fighting continuously with minimal breaks. Team 2 rotated soldiers through the medical bay, with wounded returning to combat after treatment. Something else began to show in the simulation data. Team 1 soldiers, represented by AI constructs programmed with standard galactic military responses, fought competently but cautiously. They knew that injury likely meant death, so they took fewer risks and maintained safer positions. Team 2's Marines fought differently. They pushed harder, took more aggressive actions, and held more exposed positions. The AI constructs, programmed with Earth Marine responses, fought knowing they would not be abandoned if wounded. The promise of rescue made them braver. This is not realistic, Rix protested. Real soldiers would not behave this way. The simulation is biased toward Earth doctrine. Commander Velthar shook his head. The behavioral programming is based on actual combat data from both Earth and galactic forces. The simulation is showing us what real soldiers actually do, not what we think they should do. As the simulation reached its final hours, both teams were exhausted. Enemy forces made a final push, concentrating all remaining strength on breaking the defense. Team 1's forces, reduced by casualties and exhaustion, barely held their positions. Several defensive points nearly collapsed. Team 2's situation looked worse. They had more total casualties and less optimal positioning. But then something remarkable happened. Marines who had been wounded on day 1, treated and returned to duty, were still fighting. Soldiers who would have died in Team 1's scenario were back in combat in Team 2's. The final statistics appeared on the display. Team 1 had held the station with a 45% casualty rate. 27 soldiers killed, 48 wounded, half of whom died before the simulation ended. Team 2 also held the station with a 52% casualty rate. However, only 9 soldiers killed, 147 wounded, and most of those wounded had returned to combat after treatment. The observation deck was silent. Everyone stared at the numbers. Team 2 had won the same tactical victory with less than 20% of Team 1's fatalities. Rix finally spoke, his voice subdued. You saved almost everyone, but your total casualties were higher. You took more risks. We took calculated risks, Jiwan corrected. Every Marine knew that if they were wounded, immediate help would come. That knowledge changes how you fight. You are not paralyzed by fear of injury because injury does not mean death. Hyunwoo added, in your simulation, soldiers fought carefully because wounds were potentially fatal. In ours, soldiers fought aggressively because wounds were survivable. That aggression won key positions that turned the battle. Captain Soo-hyun pulled up detailed engagement data. Look at this firefight on the second day. Team 1 soldiers maintained a defensive position and traded fire with the enemy for 3 hours. Tactically sound, but it allowed the enemy to prepare a stronger attack later. She switched to Team 2's version of the same fight. Team 2's Marines pushed forward despite taking casualties. 2 were wounded in the advance, but they were immediately evacuated. The aggressive push broke the enemy position in 20 minutes and prevented the later attack entirely. Net result: fewer total casualties and better strategic position. Instructor Kale was studying the medical data. The difference is in time to treatment. In Team 1, wounded soldiers waited an average of 47 minutes for medical care. Many died during that wait. In Team 2, average time to treatment was 6 minutes. Almost no one died from wounds that had medical intervention. But the cost, Rick said weakly. You diverted resources, exposed soldiers to danger, and complicated tactical situations. The efficiency loss was worth it, Captain Soo-hyun said firmly. Because this is not about efficiency. It is about getting everyone home alive. Team 1 won the battle but lost 27 soldiers permanently, and dozens more who will never fully recover. 3 months passed quickly at the academy. The semester that had begun with mockery and disbelief ended with fundamental changes to how the institution taught military doctrine. Students who had laughed at the impossible fatality rate now studied Earth combat protocols with serious attention. The simulation results had spread throughout the academy, and then throughout the Galactic Union military establishment. Today was graduation day. The massive ceremonial hall was filled with cadets in their dress uniforms, surrounded by proud families and dignitaries from dozens of worlds. Ships from across the galaxy orbited the station, representing the military forces these young officers would soon join. The ceremony should have been a celebration, but tension hung in the air. War was coming to the frontier. Everyone knew these graduates would soon face real combat. Commander Velthar stood at the podium, his forearms folded ceremonially. He had given this speech 40 times over his career. But today's words would be different. Today he would speak about something he had learned from the weakest species in the room. Graduates, he began, his voice amplified throughout the hall. You stand here today as officers trained in tactics, strategy, and the art of warfare. You have studied the great battles of history, learned from legendary commanders, and prepared yourselves for the responsibilities of command. The audience settled into respectful silence. Velthar's compound eyes scanned the crowd, finding Jiwon and Hyunwoo among the human cadets. They sat quietly as they always did, drawing no attention to themselves. I have commanded soldiers for 40 cycles, Velthar continued. I have led warriors from 100 worlds. I have won battles and lost them. I thought I understood war. I thought I understood what it meant to lead soldiers into combat. I thought I understood acceptable losses. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I was wrong about everything. Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was not the traditional graduation speech. Dignitaries shifted in their seats, wondering where the commander was going. This semester, a human cadet made a claim that seemed impossible. Velthar said. She stated that Earth Marines maintain a 0.8% fatality rate in active combat. We laughed. We investigated to find the lie. Instead, we discovered a truth that has forced us to reconsider everything we know about military service. He activated the holographic display behind him, showing casualty statistics from across the galaxy. Every military force represented in this room operates on the same basic principle. Soldiers are resources to be expended in pursuit of objectives. We train them well, equip them properly, and use them efficiently. But ultimately, we accept that warriors will die in war. It is inevitable. It is the nature of combat. The statistics showed average fatality rates between 15 and 35% for galactic militaries. The numbers were considered acceptable, even good in some cases. Efficient use of military resources. The humans rejected this principle entirely, Velthar said. They looked at their soldiers, saw fragile beings with thin skin and weak bodies, and made a different choice. They decided that weakness would not be a death sentence. They built a military doctrine around a simple idea, that every soldier matters more than every objective, every mission, every victory. That bringing their people home alive is the only measure of success that truly counts. He showed footage from the simulation, the defense of Kelvar Station. The audience watched as human Marines stopped fighting to save wounded comrades, as medical ships flew into danger, as soldiers formed protective barriers with their own bodies around injured fighters. Look at this carefully, Velthar said. By every principle we teach at this academy, these tactics are wrong. They sacrifice tactical advantage. They expose healthy soldiers to danger. They divert resources from combat operations to medical evacuations. Every military manual would call this inefficient, emotional, and tactically unsound. He changed the display to show the final casualty statistics. Yet this inefficient doctrine produced 9 fatalities compared to 27 using standard tactics. This emotional approach returned 147 wounded soldiers to combat when they would have died under our protocols. This tactically unsound strategy won the same engagement with less than 1/3 the permanent losses. The hall was completely silent now. Every eye was fixed on Velthar, on the numbers that challenged decades of military wisdom. The difference is simple, Velthar explained. We have always taught that missions matter more than individuals, that strategic objectives justify casualties, that good commanders minimize losses but accept them when necessary. The humans teach something different. They teach that every soldier is the mission, that no objective is worth more than a life, that there is no such thing as acceptable losses. Ambassador Taewon sat in the audience listening with pride. Beside him, Colonel Daehyun nodded slowly, remembering the battles where this doctrine had saved his life and the lives of countless others. Velthar continued, "This is not sentiment. This is the most practical military strategy we have ever encountered. When soldiers know they will not be abandoned, they fight with incredible courage. When warriors trust that injury does not mean death, they take actions that would terrify others. When every member of a military force knows they matter absolutely to their comrades, they become something more than a fighting unit. They become a brotherhood that cannot be broken." He gestured to the human cadets in the audience. These humans are physically the weakest species at this academy. They have no natural armor, no enhanced abilities, no biological advantages in combat. Yet they have taught us that the strongest military force is not built on physical strength. It is built on trust, on the absolute certainty that no one will be left behind. Rick sat in the 3rd row, his blue feathers still and his expression thoughtful. 3 months ago he had mocked these humans as liars and weaklings. Today he understood that they possessed a strength his people had never discovered. Not strength of body, but strength of commitment to each other. Effective immediately, Velthar announced, this academy is implementing new protocols based on Earth Marine doctrine. All military forces in the Galactic Union are receiving updated training materials. Combat medic requirements are being expanded. Medical evacuation procedures are being redesigned. We are adopting the golden hour principle. Every wounded soldier will reach surgical care within 60 minutes. The announcement caused excited whispers throughout the hall. This represented a fundamental shift in galactic military operations, the largest doctrinal change in centuries. Early testing shows potential casualty reductions of 60% across the board, Velthar said. But that is not why we are making these changes. We are changing because we finally understand what the humans have known all along. That the true measure of a military is not how many enemies it can kill, but how many of its own it can save. He looked directly at Jiwon and Hyunwoo. When the humans first joined the Galactic Union, we pitied them. They seemed so fragile, so vulnerable. We wondered how they survived their own violent history. Now we understand. They survived because they refused to accept death. They turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. They made caring for each other a tactical advantage instead of a liability. Ambassador Taewon stood, recognizing his cue. He walked to the podium as Velthar stepped aside. The old Marine looked out at the graduates, seeing young officers from 100 worlds, all about to enter a dangerous profession. Commander Velthar asked me why Earth developed such different military philosophy. Taewon said, "The answer is simple but painful. Humans spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We became very, very good at killing. We learned every possible way to destroy ourselves. We fought wars that scarred continents and killed millions. We studied death until we were masters of it." He paused, his voice growing quiet. "And then finally we learned something more important. We learned that anyone can teach a soldier to fight. Anyone can build weapons that kill. Anyone can devise tactics that win battles. Those are easy lessons. The hard lesson, the one that took us thousands of years to learn, is how to keep soldiers alive, how to value life more than victory, how to measure success not by enemies defeated but by friends saved." Taewon's eyes scanned the audience. "You are graduating today into a galaxy at war. You will face danger, violence, and chaos. Some of you will be wounded. Some of you may die. But I hope that what you have learned here will change those statistics. I hope you will remember that the strongest military force is not the one that accepts casualties, but the one that refuses to accept them. Not the one that uses soldiers efficiently, but the one that values soldiers absolutely." He gestured to all the graduates. "In your dress uniforms, you wear rank insignia, unit badges, and honor marks. But there is a symbol that some of you have started wearing that means more than all of those. A simple patch showing one soldier carrying another. This symbol has spread throughout your class across species and cultures. It represents the promise that Earth Marines make to each other, that no one is left behind, that every life matters, that we fight for each other as much as for any cause." Hundreds of graduates were indeed wearing the patch, human and non-human alike.